Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode here on European Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and this message it comes from a translation, and this is the narration of that message that I received. The narration reads like this: "Hello, my brother. How are you? Can you please post my story as hidden identity?" So after I had broken up with my husband because of his cheating ways, I then came here to South Africa. And when I came, I was heartbroken and I was really desperate. At that time, I had told myself that I was never going to date a man who was not mature. When I came to South Africa, I was staying in this other location. So the people that I found there in the location, they used to go to the nearby farms whereby they were working as farm workers, and some of them they were working in town. So there was this other place at the end of the location whereby the trucks that were from the farms would come to pick up the farm workers as well as the other cars that will be picking up the people that were going to town. I then saw that this was a great business opportunity. I then started making some fat cooks in South Africa. They call it magwinya. So I used to make them. Then I would go and sell them to the people. I was earning not a lot of money, but it was just enough for me so that I can survive. Then there was another man who was from Zim. This man, he then became my customer. One day, he then took those fat cooks and he didn't pay me. He told me that he was going to pay me later on. And each and every time that I would ask him to repay me the money which he was owing me, he would refuse. Until one day, he said that the reason why he was refusing it was because he wanted something in exchange and he wanted my numbers so that he can repay me back. I then gave him my numbers. After I had given him my numbers. We then started chatting on WhatsApp, and he told me that he loved me. And at that time, my brother, me and the girls that I was staying with, we were really starving, like starving to death, because we were not yet working. So when that man said that he loved me, I saw that it was far much better for me to date this man, even though I was not yet ready for a relationship. But this was out of desperation. I then started dating him, and he said that he wanted me to stay with him, but he almost like hijacked me before I had made a decision if I really loved him or not. And one day when I went to stay and one day when I went to his place for a sleepover, he then woke up the next morning and he went back, and I was just sleeping in bed after he had gone to work. My brother, when I was fast asleep, I don't know if this thing happened in a vision or if I was fully awake or if it was just a dream. But the only thing that I saw is that when I opened my eyes, I then saw that in front of me there was a woman that was standing in front of the bed that I was sleeping on. And this woman, my brother, she had her back against me. And when I looked at her back, I saw that there was a knife that was stuck on her back. And it seemed as if there was someone who had stabbed her with that knife, and there was blood that was coming out of her body. And I could see that no, even though the knife was stuck in one place on her back, but it seemed as if this knife had stabbed her several times because of the blood that was coming out. When I saw that vision, it was just a quick vision. Then that woman just disappeared. So after I had seen everything, my brother, I started praying and I started praying because I was suspecting that in our family there was someone who was causing us not to get married, because there was this uncle of ours. We had heard some stories whereby he had a tokoloshi. So this tokoloshi that he had, it required that it wanted wives from our family. So I started praying and I was chasing away the spirit of that tokoloshi, and I said, go away, I do not want you to disturb my marriage. This is my marriage that God has given to me. I then continued staying with my boyfriend, and each and every time we had an argument, I kept on blaming myself and I kept on blaming the spirit which I suspected was coming from my family. With time, my brother, I then started to see that my new husband, he was getting very violent towards me, and the way that he was being violent, it was just irrational. Sometimes when me and him will be making love, he will just stop and he would look at me and he would say, why are you not enjoying? And he would start beating me up and he would say, why are you dry? It means that you are not enjoying. You are supposed to be wet down there. Why are you dry? You are thinking about someone else. And if I would try to answer him, then the beating will start. He used to beat me almost on a daily basis until one day, my brother, and at that time I had already fallen pregnant for him. On that day, he just came and we started having a very small argument. And when we were having that small argument, he then took a knife and he started threatening me with that knife. And on that day, if it was not by the grace of God, I was going to die. After he had taken that knife, he approached the place where I was sleeping on the bed, and my brother, he stabbed the bed with that knife. He stabbed the bed so bad. He stabbed the bed with all of his force, and I was really scared. I ran out of the house screaming, and I then found out that outside, our neighbors, they were just standing outside listening to everything that happened. And if you ever hear that there is a woman who has been killed by her husband, sometimes it is even possible for other people to go in their room so that they can rescue her. But what I found out on that day is that when you are about to get killed, people who can rescue you, they do not even rescue you. They will just stand by whilst you are being killed. After I had ran outside, that was when that man that I was staying with came outside holding a knife. And this knife that he was holding, it was full of blood, and there was blood everywhere. The way that the blood was flowing out of his hands, it seemed as if there was someone who had opened up a tap of blood. So what had happened is that by the time that he was stabbing the bed with the knife, maybe he made a mistake and he cut himself with that same knife that he wanted to use to kill me. So he had cut one of his veins on his hand. So the vein, it was just pumping out blood. There was blood everywhere. People quickly called the ambulance and he was taken to the hospital. When he was taken to the hospital, I then ran away, my brother, and I then started staying with this other friend of mine, and I found a job and I started working as a stay-in maid. Whilst I was working there, that man, he started apologizing and he said that he didn't know what had gotten over him. And honestly, at that time, I was still blaming those spirits that I suspected that they were spirits of anti-marriage that came from our family side. And I was still praying about it. But when he was begging for me to take him back, so my husband's relative who was now speaking with me, he was the one who told me everything that happened in the family. So what happened is that there is one of their uncle who used to be a soldier. So this uncle of theirs who was a soldier, he used to stay in the barrack and he had two wives. These two wives of his were staying in the village. So whilst they were staying in the village, he used to come and visit them. Then the youngest wife, she then started cheating and she was even prostituting herself to the other men in the village. So when that man who was a soldier heard the news that his young wife was busy prostituting herself, he then came back from the barrack in secret. He came at night and he hid himself in the forest until he had seen that his wife, he had made another man to enter into their bedroom. When he saw everything, he then rushed into the compound. He kicked down the door, and what this soldier had done is that whilst he was in the forest, he had taken a branch of a tree and he had made it to look like a spear. So when he rushed into that room, so the man whom his wife had in the bedroom ran away, but he stabbed that man, but he managed to get away. When he returned back in the bedroom, the wife, she tried to jump from the bed because she was really scared, because this man, when he returned from the barrack, he had one of those army knives that he was holding in his other hand. So when his cheating wife tried to jump from the bed, she then fell in front of him, and that was when he started stabbing her on her back. He stabbed her too many times and she then fell to the ground as she was bleeding. As if this was not enough, that man then turned her body around and took that branch that he had made to look like a spear, and he started stabbing her in her stomach area. After he had stopped her in the stomach area, that was when he lifted her body up and he went outside and he stood in the compound and he dumped her body in the compound, and he then ran and he hid himself in the forest. When they were now searching for her, they found out that he had hanged himself in the forest. When my husband relative told me this story, I then said that, yo, so it meant that this spirit, it was not a spirit of anti-marriage that I was suspecting, but it was the spirit of that woman that had been killed by one of my husband's relative. And when I heard this story, I then thanked the Lord and I said that if it was not by His grace, then it meant that my boyfriend, he wanted to kill me on that day, because as he was stabbing the bed, there was something weird that he said. He said, "Today I am going to kill you. I want to go back with you." So I didn't understand where exactly he wanted to go with me. So it meant that it was the spirit of that woman who was murdered by his uncle who had possessed him so that he can kill me. That is my story, my brother. So I think that before you get into a relationship, like a serious relationship with someone, at least do a little bit of a research, because this thing whereby you just go into a relationship without knowing the background of your partner that you are now committed to, it is very dangerous. You need to have a brief background about the family history, because in this case I was blaming myself and thinking that it was the spirit of anti-marriage, yet there was a spirit of a dead woman that was causing all of this stuff that I was going through. My husband relative even said that the reason as to why he was being violent towards me, it was because there is sort of like a oath whereby this spirit of that woman that was murdered, she then chose that each and every man that was going to be born into that family will belong to her, and all of them, they were struggling to have children. So when he made me to fall pregnant, then it angered that spirit, because she was like saying, why have my husband impregnated you? And it is a jealousy spirit, and that was why the violence kept on happening, because he used to beat me up even when I was pregnant. He would kick me in the stomach, not showing me that he cared for his child that I was caring for him. Dear listeners, right there was a narration of a message that I received. Then we tried to give you this translation.